My wife cheated on me with our accountant and stole $250, $0 from our joint account, then secretly signed legal documents claiming I abandoned her. Now she's demanding half our property and threatening litigation. All while I just found out she's been planning this betrayal for months. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how my wife, Lisa, turned out to be the biggest liar and cheat I've ever known. Honestly, I thought we had a solid marriage. We had our ups and downs, sure, but I never suspected she'd be capable of what she did. That was until I found out she was sleeping around with our accountant, Mark, and stealing $250,000 from our joint account. The craziest part, she's out there pretending to be the innocent victim, claiming I abandoned her and trying to turn everyone against me. It all started about 6 months ago. Lisa had been acting weird, more secretive than usual, hiding her phone, deleting texts. I'd catch her sneaking around, but she'd just brush it off as work stress or needing privacy. She's the kind of woman who's bitchy, always quick to lie and spin stories. If you pressed her, she'd just get defensive, accuse me of mistrusting her. But I noticed little things, like her phone bill suddenly spiking with calls to an unknown number, or her disappearing for hours on end. I'd ask her about it, and she'd say she was working late or meeting a client. Then came the night I saw her phone light up with a message from Mark. I was in the living room and saw her hurriedly hide her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. I didn't say anything at first. Instead, I waited. 2 days later, I decided to check her email account when she was out. That's when I saw the email chain, dozens of messages between her and Mark, talking about their secret, making plans, and even explicit messages about sex. It was like a punch to the gut. I couldn't believe it. Lisa, my wife, was cheating on me with our accountant. Mark was supposed to handle our finances, and I trusted him, or I thought I did. How could she do this? How could she betray me, not just emotionally but financially? I started digging deeper, looking through bank statements, and that's when I saw the transfer $250, $0 gone from our joint account over the last few months. Just vanished. A huge chunk of our savings gone without explanation. I confronted her the next morning. I told her I knew everything. Her face went pale, then red with anger. She denied everything at first, saying I was crazy, accusing me of snooping and mistrusting her. She told me she was tired of my suspicions, that I was paranoid and jealous. Then she got bitchy, saying I was just an insecure husband who couldn't handle her success. She spun these stories about how Mark was just a friend, how I was overreacting, how it was all a misunderstanding. But I had the evidence, the emails, the bank statements, the secret texts. There was no denying it anymore. The emotional roller coaster hit me hard. I was furious, feeling betrayed beyond words. How could she do this to me, to us, to our marriage? I felt humiliated, stupid for trusting her all these years. I was angry at Mark, at the world, at myself for not catching her sooner. But underneath all that anger was a deep, aching sadness, the kind that makes you question everything you thought you knew about the person you loved. How could she lie so effortlessly? How could she steal from us and then turn around and pretend to be the victim? It was like I'd been hit by a freight train. I wanted to crumble, but I knew I had to act fast. First, I gathered all the evidence, the emails, bank statements, her signed legal documents she secretly filed claiming I abandoned her, which was a lie. I knew she was planning to spin this into a legal battle, demanding half our property and threatening litigation. I felt the weight of betrayal crushing me, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I couldn't stay silent. I had to do something, not just for my own sake, but for what was right. So I started making a plan. I hired a lawyer, started documenting everything, and prepared myself for the fight ahead. Lisa was still playing her games, trying to spin her narrative, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it. No way. I realized I'd been blind for too long, trusting her blindly, and now I had to face the reality that my marriage was over, at least in its original form. But I wasn't just going to roll over and let her walk all over me. I was going to fight for what was mine, for my dignity, and for the truth. That's where I stand now. I don't know how this will end, but I do know one thing. I've lost the woman I thought I knew, and I'll never trust her again. Once I had all the evidence laid out in front of me, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. Everything I thought I knew about Lisa, about our life together, was crumbling fast. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was financial, legal, and deeply personal. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. All I kept thinking was how she had been planning this behind my back for months, maybe even longer. She'd been lying, manipulating, and stealing from us while pretending to be the perfect wife. I decided I needed to confront her again, face to face, and get some answers. I wanted her to know I wasn't going down without a fight. The next day I called her at work, told her I needed to talk, and asked her to come home early. When she arrived, she looked annoyed, like I was bothering her. That bitchy smirk she always wore when she thought she was in control was still there, but it didn't fool me anymore. I was done playing nice. When she walked in, I told her I knew everything about Mark, the money, the legal documents she signed claiming I abandoned her. Her eyes widened for a second, then she shifted into damage control mode. She started spinning her lies again, insisting she was innocent, that I was just a jealous, paranoid husband who didn't understand her. She claimed Mark was just a friend, that the money was a loan she was planning to pay back, and that the legal papers were a mistake. She said she was just trying to protect herself because I was threatening to take everything from her. I cut her off. I told her I didn't believe a word of it. I said, "Lisa, this isn't just about some affair. You stole $250, $0, lied about everything, and you signed legal documents claiming I abandoned you. That's a crime. How do you explain that?" Her face turned red, then white. She tried to deny everything, but I had the evidence. I laid out the emails, the bank statements, the signed documents, and her own texts. I told her that I was filing for divorce, that I was taking her to court, and that I was going to make sure she paid for what she did. Her reaction was classic Lisa. She got defensive, then angry. She called me crazy, said I was ruining her reputation, and accused me of trying to control her life. "You're just jealous because Mark doesn't want you anymore," she spat. "You're a paranoid, insecure mess. None of this is real." She even had the nerve to say I was the one cheating, that I'd been unfaithful all along, and that I was trying to cover my own tracks. I just stared at her, feeling a mixture of disgust and heartbreak. How could she lie so effortlessly? How could she turn everything around on me? The emotional toll was devastating. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I was furious, hurt, and betrayed all at once. All those years of trust gone. I started questioning everything I believed about her, about us. I wondered if I ever really knew her at all. But beneath all that, I also felt a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't just about the money or the affair. It was about the fact that I was married to someone who didn't care about honesty, about respect, about the vows we took. She turned into someone I barely recognized, and I knew I had to get out of this mess, no matter how painful it was. I decided to hire a lawyer, someone who specialized in divorce and financial crimes. I wanted to make sure I protected myself, my assets, and my reputation. I also started gathering more evidence: her secret texts, her signed legal documents, her attempts to hide the money. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I knew she'd try to spin it all to manipulate the situation, but I was prepared. I wanted justice, not just for myself but for what she had taken from us. The next few days were a blur. I filed for divorce, served her the papers, and prepared for what was coming. She continued to deny everything, of course, but I saw through her lies now. I knew her game. She was trying to keep her grip, to control the narrative, but I wasn't going to let her. I was done with her manipulations, her bitchy attitude, her lies. I felt a strange mix of relief and despair. Relief that I finally saw her true colors, and despair because I knew this was going to get messy. What hit me hardest was realizing how much trust I'd lost, not just in her, but in the idea that marriage was supposed to be honest and supportive. I had given her everything: my love, my trust, my savings, and she had just thrown it all away for a quick thrill and some cash. I kept thinking about the future, about rebuilding my life, and about the lessons I'd learned. Never again would I ignore the signs. Never again would I trust blindly. I'm still in the thick of it, fighting her legal battles and trying to piece my life back together. But one thing's clear: I'll never forget what happened, and I'll never let someone betray me like that again. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, It's that some people are just wired to lie, cheat, and steal, and the only way to protect yourself is to stay vigilant and never ignore the red flags. After I filed for divorce and handed her the papers, Lisa's true colors came out even more. She was furious, of course, throwing tantrums and yelling about how I was destroying her reputation, how she was the real victim here. But behind her venomous words, I could see the cracks, the panic, the desperation. She had always been good at lying, but now it was obvious she was trying to hold on to her lies with everything she had. She started to spin stories that she was the one being betrayed, that Mark was just a business associate she'd been helping out, not some lover. She claimed she only took the money because she was desperate, that she was planning to pay it back, that she never meant for it to go this far. She even went as far as signing legal documents claiming I had abandoned her, trying to pin everything on me so she could get sympathy from the court and maybe even keep some of our property. That was the moment I realized she was planning this all along. She was orchestrating her escape, and I was just an obstacle in her way. I knew I had to act fast. I contacted my lawyer, a sharp woman named Sarah who specialized in financial crimes and divorce. We started building a case. I handed over all the evidence I had collected, the emails, the bank statements, the signed documents. We also hired a private investigator to look into her dealings with Mark. It turned out she'd been meeting him at secret locations, even had a fake identity for some of her meetings. She was clever, but not clever enough. I had her dead to rights. Meanwhile, Lisa's threats escalated. She threatened to sue me for custody of our house, demanded half the property, and said she'd fight me in court over everything. She was trying to turn the tables, painting herself as the wronged wife who was just trying to survive. She even claimed I'd been abusive, which was a complete lie. I never raised my voice at her, never hit her, and I had plenty of witnesses to confirm that. But I knew her playbook. She was trying to manipulate the system, to make me look bad while she played the victim. I felt a deep sense of betrayal, but also a strange resolve. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I started documenting all her actions, gathering more evidence to show her true intentions. I also reached out to some of our friends and family, warning them about her manipulations. I wanted them to see her for what she really was, a liar and a thief. It was hard because I loved her once, but I knew I had to protect myself and my future. One night I caught her trying to forge my signature on some documents, probably to try and transfer more money or hide assets. I was stunned. How far was she willing to go? That was the moment I realized I couldn't trust her anymore, not even a little. I had to cut all ties and go full legal mode. We filed for a court hearing, and I prepared my case to prove she'd been planning this betrayal for months. I knew I had to do everything I could to keep her from walking away with half of everything, especially the money she stole and the property she was demanding. The court date came faster than I expected. Lisa showed up dressed to impress, acting like she was the wronged wife, crying fake tears and giving her sob story about how I'd abandoned her and how she was just trying to survive. It was disgusting. I sat there, calm but furious, watching her spin her web of lies. I presented all my evidence, and I could tell the judge was skeptical of her stories. The emails, the bank transactions, her signed legal documents, and the witness statements painted a very clear picture. She had been planning this from the start. As the hearing went on, Lisa's facade started to crack. She tried to deny everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. I saw her face turn pale when the judge questioned her about the missing money and the forged signatures. She kept insisting she was the victim, but it was obvious she was cornered. I felt a strange mixture of relief and anger, relief that I was finally exposing her, lies and anger that I had ever trusted her at all. In the end, the court ruled mostly in my favor. The judge ordered her to pay back the stolen money, and she was denied half of the property, which was a huge blow to her plans. But the fight wasn't over. Lisa continued to threaten, to manipulate, and to try and sway the court. I knew she was dangerous, and I had to stay vigilant. I also knew that I'd need to keep fighting to protect what was left of my life and my sanity. Throughout all this, I kept thinking about how naive I'd been. I'd always believed that marriage was about trust, honesty, and loyalty. Turns out, Some people are just masters of deception. I learned that the hard way. Now I'm just trying to pick up the pieces, rebuild from the wreckage, and make sure she doesn't get away with everything she's stolen. The biggest lesson I've taken from this: never ignore the signs, and never assume someone has your best interests at heart when they're hell-bent on lying and manipulating. Trust is earned, not given blindly. After the court ruling, I thought some sense of peace might settle in, but Lisa's reaction was anything but peaceful. She was furious, furious enough to try and turn the entire situation around. She started claiming that I was the one who had been cheating, that I'd been unfaithful all along, and that I'd been orchestrating everything to ruin her. The woman was relentless. She even went as far as trying to manipulate some of our friends and family, telling them I was abusive, unstable, and that I'd abandoned her first. Her bitchy attitude didn't change. If anything, she doubled down on her lies. She'd call me late at night, screaming, accusing me of trying to ruin her reputation because I was jealous. She'd cry crocodile tears, trying to get sympathy from anyone who would listen. I knew she was desperate, and honestly, it was infuriating. She had stolen money, lied to the court, forged documents, and now she was trying to paint herself as the victim. It was classic Lisa, a manipulative, narcissistic personality who only cared about herself. I kept my distance, but I stayed vigilant. I hired a private investigator to keep tabs on her, just in case she tried to do something even more reckless. Turns out she was still meeting with Mark, still trying to cover her tracks. I found out she'd been secretly trying to sell some of our jewelry and valuable assets, probably to fund her next move. I was stunned. She was willing to burn everything down just to save herself. That's when I realized she was dangerous, not just emotionally, but in a calculated, cold way. Meanwhile, I was working on rebuilding my life. I started seeing a counselor to process what I'd been through. I'd always thought I was a strong guy, but this whole experience had shaken me to my core. Trusting someone I loved and then having her betray me like that, it leaves scars. I also took steps to secure my finances better. I changed all my passwords, froze some accounts, and made sure she couldn't access anything without my approval. I didn't want her to be able to steal or manipulate anymore. The legal battle was far from over, though. Lisa's threats persisted. She threatened to sue for custody of the house, claiming I'd abandoned her, even though I had evidence to prove I was the victim here. She accused me of all sorts of things, trying to sway the court, to turn her lies into a narrative that suited her. I had to prepare for a long fight. I was determined not to let her walk away with half of everything, especially not the money she stole. I knew she'd try to spin this as a victim story, but I had the evidence to prove otherwise. One night, I caught her trying to forge a document again, this time a fake letter claiming I had signed away my rights to the house. I was stunned. How many times was she going to try and manipulate the system? That was the moment I realized I couldn't trust her anymore, not even slightly. I had to be one step ahead of her at all times. I contacted my lawyer immediately, and we prepared another round of legal action to prevent her from doing any more damage. Throughout everything, I kept feeling a mixture of anger and exhaustion. Anger because she'd betrayed me, stolen from us, and tried to ruin my reputation. Exhaustion because dealing with her constant lies and manipulations takes a toll. I had to keep reminding myself that I was doing this not just for justice, but to protect my future. I was tired of her games, her bitchy attitude, and her manipulations. I wanted this nightmare to end, but I knew it wouldn't be that simple. What's been hardest to swallow is how much I trusted her, how much I believed in our marriage. I never thought she'd become this person. The Lisa I knew was caring, loving, and ambitious. The Lisa I see now is a liar, a thief, and a manipulator. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but I guess you learn who someone really is when everything's on the line. I've learned to be cautious, to trust my instincts, and most of all, to never ignore the red flags. I'm still in the process of sorting everything out, but I've made one thing clear. I refuse to be a victim of her schemes anymore. I've got my lawyer, my evidence, and a plan to ensure she doesn't get away with what she's done. The worst part: I still feel the sting of betrayal, the kind that makes you question everything about your marriage, your judgment, and your own worth. But I also know I can rebuild. I have to. Because at the end of the day, I deserve honesty, respect, and a fresh start. The months that followed were a whirlwind of legal battles, sleepless nights, and emotional exhaustion. Lisa didn't give up easily. She kept pushing, trying to manipulate the court, the lawyers, anyone she could sway in her favor. She would show up at hearings dressed to impress, acting like the innocent victim, crying fake tears, and throwing tantrums when things didn't go her way. I couldn't believe how far she was willing to go just to hold onto her lies and her stolen money. Sometimes I'd sit in court and wonder if she truly understood how much damage she'd caused, or if she was just good at pretending. I continued to gather evidence, working closely with my lawyer, Sarah. We had to prove her pattern of deception, the forged signatures, the secret meetings with Mark, the money she siphoned off. We also found out she'd been secretly trying to sell some of our assets, including a piece of property I didn't even know she'd been talking about. Her lies were endless, and I started to see her for what she really was, a master manipulator who would do anything to get what she wanted. Meanwhile, I was trying to put my life back together. I reconnected with old friends, leaned on my family for support, and started focusing on my career again. I also took a hard look at myself and realized I'd let her manipulate me for too long. I'd ignored the signs, excused her behavior, and believed her when she said she was doing everything for us. Now I saw the truth. She'd only been looking out for herself, and I was just a pawn in her game. That realization hurt, but it also gave me a sense of clarity. I was done being the victim. One of the most shocking moments came when I discovered she'd been secretly planning to leave the country with some of the stolen money. I found out from a tip-off from a private investigator I'd hired. She'd been talking about fleeing to another country, maybe to start fresh, leaving everything behind. I couldn't believe how far she was willing to go. I immediately contacted my lawyer and put a stop to it. We filed an emergency court order to freeze her assets and prevent her from leaving the country with any more of our money. That was a turning point. I realized I had to be even more vigilant. I couldn't let her manipulate her way out of this mess. I also contacted the authorities, who started investigating her for theft, fraud, and forgery. The police raided her house and found evidence of her secret meetings, forged documents, and some of the stolen money hidden in a safe. The realization hit me hard. She was a criminal, not just a dishonest wife. How could someone I loved turn into someone so cold and calculating? Throughout all this chaos, I felt a strange mixture of relief and heartbreak. Relief because I finally had the truth out in the open, and heartbreak because I had lost the woman I once believed in. I kept asking myself, how did it all go so wrong? How did I miss the signs? But deep down, I knew I had done everything I could to protect myself and to expose her lies. I also knew that no matter how much she tried to manipulate the situation, the truth would come out. Now, I'm at a point where I have to decide my next move. The court hearings are ongoing and I'm preparing for the final judgment. I've come to terms with the fact that I might never get all the money back, but I'm determined to ensure she pays for her actions. I've also started therapy to help me deal with the emotional scars. The betrayal runs deep, but I refuse to let it define me. I want to rebuild my life, learn from this nightmare, and move forward stronger than ever. Looking back, I realize how naive I was to trust blindly. The lesson here is clear. Always keep your eyes open, listen to your instincts, and never ignore the red flags. People can hide their true selves for a long time, but eventually, their actions speak louder than words. I hope anyone reading this who might be going through something similar learns that honesty and integrity are everything, and betrayal, no matter how well hidden, always comes to light in the end. I'm still healing, but I'm also moving on, and someday I'll find someone who values honesty and loyalty as much as I do. Now, as I sit here reflecting on everything that's transpired over these past months, I realize how much I've been through and how much I've learned. Lisa's betrayal shattered the life I thought I knew, but it also forced me to confront my own boundaries, my capacity for resilience, and the importance of never taking trust for granted. I've come to understand that some people are just wired differently. They'll lie, cheat, steal, and manipulate without remorse. And the only way to protect yourself is to stay vigilant and keep your guard up. The legal battles, the accusations, the lies, they all took a toll. There were moments I felt like giving up, moments I questioned whether I'd ever recover from the betrayal. But I kept pushing forward, fueled by the desire to do what's right and to make sure she paid for the damage she caused. I learned to stand firm, to gather evidence, to fight for what's mine, and to trust my instincts. That's a lesson I'll carry with me forever. Never ignore the red flags and always protect your own interests. The emotional scars are still there, but they're not as raw as they once were. Therapy helped me process the anger, sadness, and betrayal. I've realized that forgiveness isn't about excusing her actions. It's about forgiving myself for trusting her in the first place and learning to let go of the pain. I've also come to accept that some things are beyond my control. I can't change what she did, but I can control how I respond to it. Looking ahead, I know I'll rebuild. I've started focusing on my career, my passions, and my personal growth. I've learned to prioritize myself, to set boundaries, and to be more cautious in trusting others. Most importantly, I've learned that true strength lies in resilience, in picking yourself up after being knocked down and moving forward with integrity. To anyone out there who might be going through something similar, I want to say this: trust is a fragile thing. Once broken, it's almost impossible to fully repair, but you can learn from it. Be vigilant, protect your assets, and never ignore the signs of deception. And most of all, never let someone's betrayal define your worth. You are stronger than the pain, and brighter days are ahead. In the end, I'm grateful for the lessons I've learned about trust, about boundaries, and about myself. Betrayal hurts, but it also forces you to reevaluate what truly matters. I've come out of this a wiser, more cautious person, and I know that one day I'll find happiness again with someone who values honesty, loyalty, and respect as much as I do. Until then, I'll keep moving forward, one step at a time, knowing that I've survived the worst and come out stronger.